Hey everyone, welcome back. We have a very special treat for you in today's video. We're obviously going to be talking about this here in front of me. We're going to be returning to the question, is this the best jewelry 3D printer? Today we're going to be looking at the Novafab Sega and the accompanying ecosystem of casting resins that go along with it that many of you are familiar with, power resin. So we've been loaned this machine to use for 1 month, and as of this recording, we've been printing with it for about 3.5 weeks. Normally, I would like to have a machine for longer than that, especially of this caliber, when I'm doing a review. However, there were a number of features about it that streamlined this whole process. The largest being is that this is a closed ecosystem machine. It is designed to work exclusively with power resin materials only. So if you're already a believer in power resin materials, then this might be the machine for you because, well, it's custom designed to print with those materials to perfection. Now, some of you may see this as a huge negative. So stick around because there are, in my opinion, some compelling reasons why this machine could be a solution for your growing jewelry business. As I said, this machine is dedicated to the power resin ecosystem. So we obviously only use their materials in this machine. We're not going to be reviewing these resins today. Those will be entirely separate videos, so make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss those. For those of you who have followed along with our channel for a long time, we have actually looked at power resin materials before. Dark is not a new one to us, but vintage is. And we figured, well, if we're going to be looking at a machine dedicated to these materials, let's kind of do a re-review, especially of dark, and yeah, we'll see how things compare between using I believe at the time we were using our old Prusa SL1, which had an incredibly long exposure time for each layer, so things have changed since we did that review, and we felt it was worth coming back to. So let's come back to this printer. The Novafab Sega is on the outside extremely well built. It has this really handy little flip cover. The entire casing is made of metal, and very prominently on the front here you see this massive touchscreen compared to many other machines which just have a little dinky one. We'll come back to this touch panel in a little bit because behind it, the actual brain of the machine, there's a lot going on that makes this printer very unique. But before we get into that, let's start talking about the actual printing mechanisms. Inside the chamber is a temperature controlled heater plate. It's actually this bottom black unit down here. And what it's doing is actually radiating the heat up into the vat. And of course, this aims to keep the resin temperature approximately 30 to 35 Celsius. However, as I mentioned, this machine has been tuned to these materials specifically. So I believe dark needs like 36 Celsius and vintage needs 37. They have all of that pre-programmed, so you don't even have to think about it. I like that it's heating the resin from below. This works really well versus trying to heat this ambient chamber. Naturally, if you're heating the air within the chamber, you lift this up and all of your hot air escapes out the side, or it escapes via little gaps in the paneling or something like that. I like that it's heating the resin from below. This works really well for this style of machine. This is a DLP machine. If it were an MSLA machine where it had an LCD panel down here underneath acting as the mask for every layer, if you heat those, the LCD panels, they do start to wear out and degrade faster. DLP is projecting. The projector is actually way down here, so it can't really interfere with anything. This works really well for this style of printer. So within the build area above that, we have the build plate, which is milled from a fairly solid looking block of aluminum. It's offering a build volume of 50 by 90 millimeters on the X and the Y, and 114 millimeters on the Z axis. In my opinion, this is pretty small. Now granted, this is the smallest option, and in jewelry terms, you can still print a pile of rings, but they do offer larger options from here as well. This is the Sega, they have the Mega, and the Giga. For context of some of that build volume, this filigree bracelet, we were putting this to the test and seeing how fine it could get, but this is it was a bracelet at one point. I had to downsize it quite a lot in the slicer, and it ended up being more baby size than actual adult size. So that is basically the max build volume that you can get on the X and the Y. It can go a little bit taller. As we can see on the build plate, it is heavily perforated, which means it's just full of holes. This is something that we have seen on larger machines specifically. To name one, I believe it's the Frozen Mega. That one has a huge build plate, and what these holes actually do is they help alleviate the pressure that's created when you compress the fluid down. You're trying to bring that build plate down to the 50 micron away from the bottom of the build volume. That's pushing the liquid out, and it's creating a lot of movement. If you start to expose your resin before that movement is finished, then you get weird anomalies and incomplete prints and just general failure. Putting holes in it allows that force to go up rather than entirely out to the side. So it really does help speed up the printing. And I believe, unlike pretty much every other printer on the market, these holes are actually necessary for this type of vat. If we undo these two hold down screws on the side and we pull this out, you'll notice it's all transparent and it's actually made of glass. Now specifically, this glass has a silicon layer on the inside, on the bottom, where you would have that separation happening. And this, of course, just like an FEP foil, helps the resin separate during each layer. I've never seen this before on any other printer. I don't think I'll see it on any other printer besides this one. I think it's just so finely tuned with their materials that this solution is just something that separates them from everyone else. And I think this is in no small part why this is such a closed ecosystem. We haven't actually put any other resins in this material, in this printer to print with. We didn't want to do that. But I don't think it would go very well. I had 1 or 2 print failures so far while I've had this machine. We're actually going to dissect it because I did see some issues come up because of that failure. Now this silicone layer does break down, but Novafab does offer these vats very affordably. This one is about $30. But if you don't like that, they actually offer a replenishment kit. I believe it's $150 per bottle because it's basically like a silicone RTV. So you've got your part A and your part B. You mix those together. It may require vacuuming. We didn't get any of this, so I can't confirm that. And then you pour it back in, you peel off the dead silicone layer, you pour it back in on a nice level surface, and you let it harden. This will get you about $8 per vat worth of material. It's actually quite a large bottle from what I've seen. Now they do make an ultra long life version of this vat, which is good for about 200 prints and costs $300, which equals out to about $2 per print. So they do have very economic solutions, and it's really good to see that they have those options available. So this particular print basically failed, and it got stuck to the bottom of the vat. When I peeled it up, it took out some chunks in the center here, and it is what it is. That happens. It's not very encouraging that this happened with their materials because it kind of indicates that this is not very durable. However, it's different, and based off of some of these print tests that I did, like this guy that has a single 1mm support and this didn't fail, having failures on this machine I feel like is going to be kind of a rare occurrence, assuming you follow good practices with supporting. So I'm going to use this little hooky Cricut tool, and I'm just going to peel up in the corner here and see how this happens. It might come out in chunks. It might come out as a full sheet. I'm not really sure. I'm just going to go trace along the corners here. I do see some chunks coming up. Oh yeah. Okay, so I got under it. And you can see here when I pull, oh, we might actually get a sheet. Yeah, there we go. So there is the silicone layer. Oh, it broke. Interesting. So it's not like RTV silicone where it's got some stretch and some durability. It's something else, which does make sense as it is glass clear. This is something that, oh, it actually like has a weird refraction thing going on. That's really neat. One of my big concerns with this type of vat is the use of the glass and the silicone itself. Because as we know with FEP and FEP, PFA, things like that, ACF, those materials have a very high light transmittance. The light can pass through them very easily. Oop, it broke again. Glass, on the other hand, as we know from my Prusa, which has a glass screen protector, glass reflects a lot of UV light, and this is like a 1/4 inch thick piece of glass. Now, DLP is much stronger light source than MSLA, so it does make sense that you'd have, really good power, regardless of how thick this is. But I do wonder about like refraction, how much is being distorted. Is there anything like this? Is this lens grade glass? It's hard to say. It's not for me to say that, but it works, and that's all that really matters. So as much as I might have some concerns, they're not really valid because they've clearly gotten past it. So it seems that this is about 1/8 of an inch thick, 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter or so. So removing the silicone, as I just did right there, this vat, I presume maybe one more little light cleaning, is now ready to be replenished. You could pour in that silicone kit from the top, put it nice and level on a table. This table is not level. That's something you'll definitely want to check before you do this, because the last thing you want to do is have an unlevel surface, and then your print bed can no longer meet it perfectly flat. That'll be very, very important if you decide to get this one machine and have the refurbishment. Now, enough about the vat. Underneath here, we do have a DLP system. It's running at 405 nanometer. It's good for about 20,000 hours, which is pretty normal for DLP. I really like this option because, well, DLP's kind of easy street. You don't have to think about it. You're never going to have to change a screen. The projectors are generally under warranty for quite a long time, and replacing them is pretty easy. The Sega has an XY accuracy of 47 microns, which compared to some of the newest 16K machines sounds a little bit high, especially for jewelry. But DLP is different than MSLA. There are some tricks of the light that can be applied to the light source, which helps smooth out the surfaces and go beyond the hard limits of a square pixel. And you got to remember that this is a closed ecosystem. These machines are dialed into perfection. They have just the perfect amount of anti-aliasing. Everything has been tuned so that you pour it in, select the profile, hit go, and you're off to the races. Now that's a really good segue to go back to this touch screen down here. So this is the home page. You can see here, these are our not preloaded, you actually have to load models in, but these are the ones that I have loaded, so I can have my filigree supported, 70% size. Loop ring, this is the one that failed. Incredibly hard to print that one. The Novafab support test that I generated, a filigree ring, and the chain ring. So those are all available on the machine itself, ready to go. Again, you can upload more of these files from a computer over Wi-Fi, no problem. But there's also an add job button here that works with the USB port on the side. Gives you some stats. This is printer 424. This is the exposure amount. This is saying that it has an automatic bed generation thing over here. We can change all those settings in a second. And then it shows you what the temperature of the resin is right now. And then, of course, there's some admin things, and we can power it off if we want to. So that's home. This will tell you, of course, how many layers, the estimated gram weight, and your print time. If we go down to Edit Model, you can still have access to this, and then see exactly how it was sliced within the machine. One thing that I did not really appreciate about this was if you go to Delete All, it gets rid of everything. It wipes every single model. If you just go delete, it just deletes the one that's in front of you. So I made that mistake at one point and hit delete all, and it didn't really ask me enough. It didn't warn me enough, if you ask me, because I just wiped it and it was gone. If we go down to calibration, we can go up to end. You can cancel that. You can manually move it up and down as much as you like. So you have some tools regarding that. Then we can go down to settings, and this is where we have some more options. So there's auto base, as I mentioned before, just tells you that it's been activated, and what that does is it creates this, the lattice, around other parts of your supports. You can change your resin. So we've got burn at 25 micron, burn at 50 micron, dark, etc., yellow, zero, RTV, vintage, and wax. So you've got lots of options there. And these are, of course, automatically updated via Wi-Fi. I'm not currently connected to my studio Wi-Fi, so I didn't find the server, no biggie. This slider does adjust the exposure level. You can go down to 80% power or all the way up to 120% power and have it at 100 right in the middle, right there, whatever. So that's the machine itself. Now, one of the big things that I did not like about this system is that you can't build a bed. That's the one big deal breaker for me regarding the way they've handled it. What I want to do is be able to say, I want this model, and I want this model, and I want to build a bed. But as this current system is right now, you have to print one at a time. Another thing that I don't really like is that it prioritizes the center of the build vat every single time. It just puts everything right dead center. So in other words, what's happening is you're getting a very disproportionate amount of wear in the center, and you're not getting around the full print bed. I'd like to see some kind of intelligent monitoring, so to speak, of that. If you're building a bed, maybe put it over here or put it over in the corners or something so that you get more life out of your print vats. So that's the spec sheet. Now, how does this printer actually pan out in real life? What is it like to print with? What experiences did I have? So let's take a look at these prints, because they are the most perfect prints that I think I've ever seen come out of Power Resin. This is the maximum length of the print bed, but it can still go a little bit wider. I wasn't able to get all of the rings that I wanted to packed into this machine the way I oriented them, so I did have to rebuild some of them. This one was pre-supported. I actually did the supporting, but I exported the file with supports in place, and then I just downsized it all at once. So normally, I believe this lattice work would be like 0.4 mil. These are now 0.2. I believe I downsized this to about 60% of its normal size. And that included, of course, the support heads, which are now down to at least 0.1, if not smaller. And Dark was able to handle that perfectly. So an incredible piece that I will never be able to cast, because you'd have the highest end casting machine available, and even then, this is still, again, so small. I don't know if it could cast very well without a lot of help. Not to mention getting the supports off, because it is very, very flexible, very, very thin. I left all the supports on, by the way, just so you could see kind of the level of detail that it can achieve. These are down to 0.1 heads around the outside, and then there is some internal stuff as well holding up the middle of this cone. And of course, the design itself just turned out flawless. Something I've introduced into our resin testing recently is exactly the same models. However, they've been supported differently. So I start with the bare bones, a single 1 millimeter support. It has 1 millimeter head, so it's just going straight up, and I just print it as is. If it works, amazing. We know a little bit more about the resin's capabilities. If it doesn't, then I have more versions of this that are steadily more supported, and we can kind of tell how strong this resin is. This material printed everything flawlessly, so it's about as good as it can get. This is a signet ring. It did shift a little bit, and the larger surface area you see on top, especially solid surface area, the more wobble you're going to see in your printing. This was printed on that one single support, and if I was in a jam and I didn't have another piece, I would still cast this and just sand off those little layer shift marks. So that lends a lot of credence to the fact that because this resin is so well tuned to the material, you're getting very little layer adherence issues. You're going to see incredibly fast printing regardless. This took like 45 minutes, 40 minutes to print. And yeah, it's just phenomenal how good. I love Dark. Dark is like one of my favorites. So print time does vary slightly between each resin formulation, as you might expect, because they are entirely different resins designed for different purposes. We were sent bottles of Power Resin Dark, a favorite classic of ours that we just love. There's nothing about this resin I don't like. It's one of the top tier A+ list materials. And the other was this brand new material called Vintage that they've come up with. This is one of their latest and greatest. It offers a bunch of new features that many of the other resins did individually, and this one offers collectively. Let's just remember though that this is not a resin review. We'll come back to these in their own videos. So again, if you want to make sure you don't miss those, make sure you get subscribed. The fastest of the prints was dark, and that's because I think it's one of the most rigid of the two resins. So they were able to tune this to have a more aggressive lift without compromising the print quality. Something that Power Resins did tell us when we first took on this project was that they're going to start paring down their resin collection this year. And for those of you out there who are a fan of dark, maybe you've heard of Zero, which is another black printing resin, and it's just a little bit harder. They're virtually identical in every way. So these ones are just too similar, and it makes total sense that Zero would be getting the axe in favor of dark. So overall, I did have a very positive experience with this machine. It is incredibly well built and thoughtfully engineered by a company that clearly had an industry in mind. This machine is designed to make you income. You're going to be using incredibly precise materials, printing perfect models that overall in a jewelry industry, the less post-processing you're doing, the less time you have on these models, the more money you're making. Now at 9,000 USD, that is a little steep for this machine, but if you're at that level where you're able to look at this seriously, a single print bed cast in gold after could be worth, at today's ridiculous gold price anyway, could be worth 5-6 times that. So you've paid this machine off within a couple of months if you're taking into account those margins and the resin and anything that goes along with it. But for me personally, this machine is not one that I would have in my studio. I would want the bigger one. The Sega is just a little bit too small for me. The print bed being about the maximum, as I said, with this little baby-sized bracelet. My work tends to be a lot larger, so I need to have the bed space, both X, Y, and Z. This machine is designed for those of you out there who are looking for ultra-fast printing. You're printing, say, 8 models around at a time. You're feeding them off to your caster. You can have this all within cast and made within 1 day. So if you're looking for a system that is geared towards lowering downtime in the studio and increasing fidelity and speed, then this would be the option for you. If you want to see more printer reviews or get to know more about the Novafab Power Resin ecosystem, we can chat in the comment section down below. If you need additional assistance in picking up printers or equipment or studio or whatever that you might need regarding jewelry, consider joining our YouTube membership program to gain access to our Discord channel where you can chat with me and of course many like-minded people within the jewelry business. A huge thank you to Novafab and the Power Resin teams for including us in this project, and of course thanks to all of you for watching and being a part of this community. We hope to see you guys in the future when we take a look at our next exotic machine.